want to raise a point, you raise it with respect and with dignity, because that's who we are as a movement. Maybe somewhere else we can be highly emotional and insult one another, which I don't expect people who support the moral generation movement or the ambassadors of the MRM to do those. So we are just appealing to you that let's just be orderly and respect one another, but raise our views with that respect. I'm going to have only 3 speakers for now, or 4 speakers, before we go to the commissions. What is important is for us to pick up on the issues that we are going to raise, which most of them will be deliberated in the commissions. And then when we come back for plenary, that is where we can have a robust debate on some of the issues. So I think if we can approach it that way, it will assist us to move forward and with a common understanding. Professor Martin Prozeski is here already. Father Smangalisho Mkachwa is the chairperson of the Moral Generation Movement in the Republic of South Africa. It's here. Professor Matole Mutsecha is here. It's only Dr. Tito Mboweni who will arrive, I think, in the next 15-20 minutes. So I'm going to invite Father Mkachwa, who's allocated 20 minutes, which I may end up reducing to 15, to give us the purpose of the summit. Let's give him a round of applause.
Let me tell you a story, ladies and gentlemen. After the board of the Moral Generation Movement had decided that we needed, according to our mandate, to engage issues of national importance, I called MEC, the Honorable MEC Maile, who is responsible for economic development and agriculture in Gauteng province. And I said, hey comrade, we've got this project, man, but as you know, MRM has no money. We would like to partner with you. Can you support us? And then he said, yeah, man, when I'm comrade, we are man, but count us in. Now, what has happened is that they have paid for this venue, including catering. Whatever else has been prepared to make you comfortable. So I'm mentioning this because this is an extremely important contribution by a political leader as well. And we would like to express our very sincere appreciation and gratitude to him. But the reason why he was also interested, because he said the issue of the land has become a real national challenge and debate. Everybody's talking about it now. Nearly every few days, either there's a workshop or there's some discussion or some argument or in the media or everywhere about this particular topic. So therefore we thought, well, we as MRM, we're not always going to approach this from purely political side of things. There's a lot of that, that's no problem. But our perspective and our focus will be much more on the ethical implications of this whole debate. Expropriation of land without compensation. Professor Prozeski, who served on the MRM board for many years, will agree with me and all of you, ladies and gentlemen, that you cannot discuss ethics seriously in today's world without addressing the issues of poverty, unemployment, the land, landlessness, and so on. All these issues that affect the lives of our people. Otherwise, we are talking about something in the air which has nothing to do with real life and so on. So that's why then part of our mandate is to engage on issues such as this one. When there is discussion about state capture, we've got to address that. Issue of corruption, we've got to address that. Crime, we've got to address those issues and so on. But for now, since we cannot do everything, we just felt that in view of the decision that was taken by Parliament, that we needed to amend the Constitution. And in view also of the work that is being done by the review committee that Dr. Matole will address us on, that it was also then very important for us to be with the people, to identify with the masses of our people. I read a book not so long ago, and some of you have read it, called Native Life in South Africa by Saul Blackie. I'll be honest with you, when I read that book, somewhere I was so angry. Because then it gave real insight into what actually happened before, and especially when the 1913 Land Act was passed, how it was implemented, including 1913, and so it was slightly amended and so on. The callousness, the cruelty with which it was implemented, the almost destruction of family life, and so on and so on, property and a lot of suffering and so on. And what we therefore say, that it is therefore very important for us to say, as South Africans living now, not in 1913, we have this challenge together. We love this country, would like to see it thrive, would like to make sure that everybody enjoys a better life. What do we then do? So I have not invited churches as churches. I have not invited political parties as political parties. I have not invited, you know what it is, all different categories of people and so on. I have invited South Africans, some are ANC, others are EFF, I don't know whether they are here, others are women's organizations, others are youth organizations, others are academics. I see some of my good friends, they're all here, big academics and so on and so on. That's what we have done, so that we create a platform, an environment where we can, even robustly so, engage with one another. We're not here to score points or as enemies or anything of the sort. We are here as people who are concerned about an issue that affects each one of us. So I would therefore like to reinforce what the remarks that were made by our program director, to say, let's engage with one another in a spirit of building, of development. We're here to inform one another, because I listened to someone the other day, Dr. Tito Mboweni. I got very educated because he was addressing this same issue, but he gave me information that actually I'd never even heard mentioned by anybody. And I hope when he arrives, he will allude to some of that information. So it's information sharing. It's even trying to convince one another. We don't always have to agree on everything and so on. So with these few words, therefore, I would like once again to say thank you very much for honoring us and for showing your concern for an issue that impacts on the lives of everybody. As chairperson of the Moral Generation Movement, I would like to once again welcome all of you and wish you everything of the best.
I was worried. Even if I gave him 20-15 minutes, I know he can speak for 1 hour. So I was already taking my time and just about to stand up to remind you that it's 15 minutes now. No, thank you very much. And I think now you all understand why we are here and why did we come up with a request also as the board that maybe we need to have a discussion at a different level, in a different mood. Because it's different to what I was in the radio interview going to Tovela FM, I think 3-4 weeks ago, and I saw people fighting there in the studio. Because somebody was saying these and the other one was saying this, and they fought literally. Then the program had to stop a bit for 3 to 5 minutes so that we cooled them down. That all we needed was what we think and whether we can deliberate on these issues further. So we would heartily appreciate if we can proceed like that. Let me invite Professor Martin Klozeski to come and give us a presentation.
Program Director, Father Mkhatshwa, distinguished attendees and delegates, and may I also address you as fellow citizens of the great commonwealth of that which is right and good, the world of ethics. It is a huge honor for me to be here today, and I'd like to thank the program organizers for doing me the honor of inviting me to address you on the subject of the ethics of the land question before us here. My aim is to encourage thinking and discussion, not to try and settle this issue. I can't do that, but together we can. And together we can hand to the nation, perhaps, a sense of the moral values, the ethical values that should guide this enormously important and difficult question that faces us here in the country now. I do so as a professor, now an emeritus professor of applied ethics, especially as one who has had the great privilege of exploring ethics in an African context, the marvelous, wonderful, long, rich heritage of ethics in our continent and in our country. I'm not sure how many of you would be aware that according to the scientists, or an implication of the scientists, Africa is the historic motherland of ethics, because the human species first emerged on our continent and first survived on this continent long before it spread to other parts of the world. Human communities cannot survive for long without good values, so it follows that humanity invented ethics in Africa, and it's been an enormous part of my privilege to pass on here today some of the wisdom I have received from that journey that I've been able to make into the ethical heritage of Africa. And I thank you all, and I thank the organizers. My talk to you today, my address has 5 parts, short parts. There's a short introduction, then there's a main section which is about ethics, and then a shorter section which I will be talking about specifically the soil and the water, and then a very short section, if I still have time then, about the issue of the ethics of personal ownership of land, and a short conclusion. So then, the introductory remarks. My approach to the land is mainly based, as I've explained, on African ethical values because of their beauty, their power, and their relevance. And because they are supported by the ethical values of our other great cultures, traditions, and faiths. These values show that the new land dispensation that we urgently need will fail unless it is handled ethically, because doing things ethically is the only way to achieve lasting benefit for all. So far, discussion about the land question has concentrated on the political, economic, and legal aspects. While they are essential, they will not be enough on their own. They themselves must be based on shared ethical values that have stood the test of time in all our cultures, religions, and including secular belief systems, and especially have stood the time-honored values of Africa's rich ethical heritage. The key values are restorative justice, truth, respect, dignity, concern for the common good, responsibility, non-violence, and maximum inclusivity, which is, after all, what Ubuntu Buto mean. The land question is an extremely sensitive, emotional, and difficult matter, so it calls for great care and responsibility by all concerned, and that includes all of us here. It needs calm and caring minds. Calm and caring minds, not narrow personal agendas. Least of all does it need racism and violence of any kind. Elevating race to prominence was the curse of our past. It must not be allowed to bedevil our future, for it is our highly unethical past, with its violent racist oppression and injustice to the majority of our people, that has caused the land problem today. Our black African people especially continue to be scandalously deprived of land ownership and the benefits that it alone brings. So we find ourselves living in an incomplete transition from the unjust and oppressive past to a future of lasting well-being for all. This is a source of great and growing and natural discontent, and with it social instability, on the part of those so dispossessed. While the land question is therefore urgently in need of correction, doing so hurriedly and without the necessary thoroughness about ethics will harm rather than help the better future we all want. We cannot correct an historic injustice with another injustice. My second and main section is then about ethics itself. The purpose and goal of ethics is to provide the greatest possible well-being for all. At heart, it is about doing what enables all our people to thrive on a sustainable basis. So it is essential to be clear about well-being itself means, the well-being that we all want. It means personal flourishing and happiness in the context of structures, laws, customs, and cultures that support and provide for such flourishing, which in turn means good nourishment, potable piped water, health and effective health services, dignity, good educational services, safety, sources of help when needed, effective policing, honest, competent governance, effective law enforcement, and the ability to achieve financial security through employment, self-employment, and access to land. Are these characteristics the ones that relate directly to the land question on nourishment, potable piped water, dignity, safety, and financial security? The only way to achieve these is on the basis of a new land dispensation involving laws and implementation measures that promote them for all, and especially for the poor and those who have suffered dispossession. While restorative justice is a vital part of this outcome, it is not sufficient. Other ethical values must also play their part to ensure that we avoid the dreadful mistake of adopting a land policy that is ethically flawed and problematic. The Charter of Moral Values of the Moral Regeneration Movement, with its deep African roots, can help us get our ethics right. One of the most important clauses is about truth. It says that honesty, integrity are key social values. What this means for the land question is that we need all the facts and details about land ownership and land use. We also need great honesty from those who have benefited from the way land was taken without payment in past centuries and kept until today, through sale after sale. Respect for truth, which is an absolutely central ethical value, also compels us to acknowledge that while few or any landowners today personally seized the land at gunpoint from others, they didn't have to do that, because the 20th century history of land seizure was done under the armed protection of apartheid laws. These enabled mass removals, like what happened at Sophiatown, and in so many other places under the infamous Group Areas Act of the past. Today's beneficiaries of that history of injustice then bought their land from earlier owners, and so onwards, back to the original acts of violent oppression. And it is clearly therefore a history of extreme injustice. In this situation, ethics tells us that we need very accurate information. Sweeping generalizations will not be enough to prevent new mistakes and even new injustices. Let me give an example with which I am familiar. In the 1860s, a certain Christian missionary organization in Europe wanted to bring its message to a community of black South African people. Their traditional leader, whose name I know, was approached for a grant of land for them to establish a mission station. He gave it, and the mission was established. It continued for a century. Then the apartheid state, in the 1960s, declared the mission, in its language, a black spot. So I was informed when I was investigating this matter. And the black people living there were then forced to move to another place designated for them by the state. This meant the end of the mission, and the land then ultimately became available as a farm, which it remains today, a white-owned farm. What this shows is that the land of the mission was not stolen or seized at gunpoint, but given to the mission. I see no injustice there, but great generosity on the part of the community and their leader, who graciously gave the mission that land. What happened in the 1960s is very, very different. It was a clear example of structurally violent injustice to the black people that were living there, some of whom are still alive, to the benefit of the new owners. But I suspect that this particular situation of original white land acquisition, and the missionaries were from Europe, is very much the exception and not the rule in our country. All such beneficiaries of injustice must now, in honesty, and remember this is about the ethics of truth, acknowledge the truth that they have benefited from a grave injustice and indicate their willingness to help South Africa find the best way forward in justice, in concern for everybody, in a way that avoids vengeance and violence. That in itself would be service for the common good. Another vital ethical value is generosity of spirit and action, as shown by the traditional leader of the land on which that mission was established. And these values are the opposite of those nasty basic evils that we call selfishness and greed. Therefore, today's beneficiaries of the land tragedy must also offer their expertise and resources to those who lack them through no fault of their own. The recipients, in turn, would, I want to suggest, greatly assist this to happen harmoniously by understanding the extremely painful, anxious, and disturbing situation those beneficiaries are now experiencing, and by showing their willingness to see them as partners in an opportunity, as our President so recently said, in rebuilding the country. I come from KwaZulu-Natal, so Hlonipha, or Hlompo, I believe in Sesotho, meaning deep, deep, true respect for people and for their dignity, plays a prominent part in whatever new land laws are passed. This will ensure that we replace inhumanity with the humaneness of Ubuntu, not with yet more inhumanity. The next value that must shape our new land dispensation is responsibility. The ethical person and the ethical leader is one who displays great thoroughness and accountability, and who can therefore be relied upon to act with integrity and thoroughness, not hurriedly and without the necessary careful research, consultation and preparation. That is what we all must display, but it is especially important on the part of our politicians, who may be tempted, understandably, but still very, very dangerously, by the short-term gain of sloganeering and populism. We need wisdom, not opportunism. Equitable access to land ownership and equitable access to land and land ownership provide both dignity and a degree of financial security. Even small pieces of land can provide food, and when there is title to them, the land can serve as collateral for bank loans and other sources of borrowed finance, as a way of increasing the income that the land can yield. Ethics strives for lasting peace and prosperity for all, so it does not do its work violently. Though the use of force can be morally permissible as a proven last resort when every other measure has been tried and failed, and is seen as the least wrong option. But otherwise, no violence can be part of ethics' way of doing things. Therefore, the new land dispensation must be such that violence is avoided in its implementation, that this will require the utmost moral responsibility from all our leaders is surely clear. The remaining key ethical value that must be practiced is inclusivity, which is what Ubuntu means. telling us that worthwhile existence is a matter of togetherness and cooperation, not assertive, self-concerned individualism. There is no other way to ensure that all our people are respected, understood, appreciated, and helped as fully as possible, so that we create a new and lastingly better future for the land and those who depend upon it, which is all of us. So if we want to transform a great wrong of the past about the land and the people who occupied it into a great good, we all, and our leaders most of all, must understand and practice all the values that ethics alone can give to the morally sound new land laws and implementations that we need. And now briefly my third part about respecting our soil and water. The inclusivity of Ubuntu Buto includes a vital consideration of the land consideration that has so far mostly escaped attention. It is the soil. When we talk about the land, mostly what we see in our minds is farmland or urban land covered with crops, grassland, forests, houses, roads, plantations, buildings and the other infrastructures that have been built on the land. This is understandable, but it is also dangerously superficial because out of sight is, to most, is what lies beneath those crops, grasses, buildings, trees, namely the soil. As the source of all that we eat, either as plant foods or indirectly from animals, it is the very basis of healthy life. It must be cared for as such as soil, never exhausted, polluted and poisoned. Whatever happens to the question of future land ownership, we must treat the soil with utmost responsibility and respect. It is there to be cherished and protected, not exploited and exhausted. Not only then do we need a new RDP of the soul, as Nelson Mandela called for early in our democracy, with soul understood by me anyway as our deepest moral sense. We also need an RDP of the soil. If we don't care for it properly and use it responsibility, there may not be many souls left. Another vital piece of dealing with the land question is the water that falls on it and flows from it and through it, ending up irrigating our crops, in our factories and as household water. Without it we perish much faster than from exhausted soil. So ethical land use must make the sustainable care and conservation and respect of our water an absolute priority. And now, my fourth short section, a brief comment about the question of the ethics of land ownership, individual and personal land ownership. The ethical justification for individual ownership of land is the personal and financial safety and security it provides for the owner, the care and responsibility it demands of him or her, and the efficient use it promotes, compared to costly and often inefficient state ownership. Here we really do need the most careful and morally responsible handling of the matter. And that is a question I would put to you. What exactly does ethical ownership mean? It must mean more than legal ownership. It was once legal to own people in the form of slavery. That was never ethical. It was hideous. It was evil. So legal ownership alone is not what is required. It is the question of what makes ownership ethically proper. What makes it right and good? What makes it beneficial for everybody? That is the question. And your wisdom and contribution to that will be a crucial part of how we handle this question. And now by way of conclusion. My suggestion for a way forward is therefore that inclusive practical ethics must be the basis of how we settle the land question, leading to the greatest possible well-being for everybody, in ways that everybody can see is fair, is honest and caring. Before land ownership ever becomes a matter for legislation, it must therefore be the subject of the best participatory ethical discussion that we can achieve. And I really do want to thank the MRM, of which I've had the privilege of being associated from its inception virtually, for creating an opportunity for the ethics of the land question to be on the agenda so firmly as they have put it now. I think what all this means is initiating a national conversation involving all stakeholders, communities, to map the ethical road ahead on the land question. This address of mine offers my contribution to such a discussion by identifying 10 core ethical values for our discussion. They are the following then, as I went through them a few minutes ago. Truth, restorative justice, generosity, respect, respect in the deep sense that humaneness, responsibility, dignity, safety, non-violence, and the wonderful inclusivity of the Ubuntu principle, which means that this is something for us all, for everyone. Because one of the ethically beautiful things about that principle is its belief that nobody gets left out. Everybody is included. I thank you all for this opportunity.
Beautiful and thought-provoking. You must start to think. If this is the angle that I wanted to take in enhancing my views and my facts in the debate, then you have to think twice in terms of the ethical standards. Thank you very much, Prof. We believe that we still tap into that wisdom throughout the day. So we all have an opportunity today to engage all of our speakers. None of them came up with police and whatever, so they are free. If you used to walk around with 15 bodyguards, today, no, you can just talk to all of them. No, thanks very much. Without much ado, let me, I'm going to request Father to step down and invite Dr. Tito Mboweni and Professor Matole Mtsekga to come up. So that we can then, I'm going to give Dr. Matole Mtsekga and Professor Matole Mtsekga and Dr. Tito Mboweni 15 minutes each to just share with us what we requested them to come and share with you here today. And immediately afterwards, I'll look at my time and check as to whether we can have a few questions, clarity-seeking questions. But most of the issues, we'll discuss them in the commissions. And I think that is where we'll have enough time to engage. I'm going to start with Dr. Tito Mboweni, who has about 15 minutes just to share with us.
Good morning, and thank you very much for inviting me to be here this morning. See some old friends here, activists. I think that a lot of what I would have said is contained in that paper by Dr. Semuzwenya. So there's no need to repeat that. I think it's very clear to the point. The angle that I wanted to add is one about the impact of the subjugation and expropriation of land from our people has meant. First, obviously, a terrible economic consequence for our people. As Karl Marx would have said, the Land Act was principally meant to force black people away from the land to go and work in the mines and factories, the creation of an African proletariat. because once people had been separated from the means of production, land in this case, they were forced to have to go and work in the mines, in the factories. But in addition to that, you might remember a whole plethora of laws which were put in place to ensure that African people had no other opportunity but to go and work in the mines and factories to earn cash. So, for example, remember the hard tax, the poll tax, and others which had to be paid in cash, not through cattle. And the cash was to be found in the mines and the factories. In the process of that, we saw the destruction of the agricultural productive capacity of the African people. In the process, a huge amount of skills was lost, and therefore the dependence on the mines, the factories, domestic workers, farm workers, and so on. It's a whole new discussion that we can pick up. Secondly, and devastating too, was the psychological intent of these land legislations. The psychological intent also lives with us today. So over many years, it was inculcated in our minds that the land was not a good thing to be on. That the best thing was to be in the cities. To live in the cities was to become a clever. And to live in the countryside was to be Ibari. And that thing is stuck in our heads up to today. So somebody is happy in a one-room living condition in Alexander Township and calls themselves a clever and looks down upon the people who live in the countryside. Psychological damage. As Stephen Bantu Biko would have said, the best weapon in the hands of the oppressor is not the weapon, it's not the gun, but it's the mind of the oppressor. And today our people I shouldn't say this maybe. Our people look at the DJ much more with respect than a farmer. So Caspar Nyoves, for example, is far more respected and well known than a farmer because he abused my name. So that psychological damage is something that we have to look at very carefully. And I listened to the professor very, very carefully. I think it's one of the terrible, immoral things that have happened as a result of this forcible removal of black people from their land. Thirdly, that point, the liberation struggle cry, My Way Africa, was principally about the return of the land. Without the return of the land, freedom can never be complete. But who do you return this land? To the chiefs? To EFF? To who do you return the land? This is a very serious question that's going to cause a lot of debate and discussion here. Let me give an example. When my people arrived in the Zanini area, as refugees, as Zulu refugees. We were accommodated by 2 chiefs in that area. Chief Litswalo of the Mamatola people and Chief Make, who were refugees there. And we stayed there. We, typical of the Zulu tradition, we married many Basotho girls there and had many children as a result. Out of 10 boys, about 6 were conscripted into a local army, and the other 4 would ordinarily be sent to the mines to work, and the proceeds would be used to acquire more land. But after a period of time, when we had formed an army, we behaved very badly in that area. We began occupying land that belonged to Litswalo and Make people. And Mujaji. Now, if you don't approach the land question properly there, you're going to cause a war amongst the African people. And we don't want to do that. Therefore, there was a logic in our thinking when we said the land restitution process must start with the Land Act. At least we could blame the white people for that. Because they came with the Land Act, were undoing what they did. If you go back too much, you're going to cause problems. And I leave you with that issue to discuss amongst yourselves. The last point I wanted to make, since we don't have enough time, is we can't have this conversation forever. We have to come to a conclusion. And the conclusion is firstly, and Dr. Mutseha will talk about this, is firstly that we really truly need to enact immediately a comprehensive Land Act of South Africa. That Land Act will take into account the existing different forms of ownership of land, Ingonyama Trust and other people. Because you can't wish them away, but you have to incorporate them into a new comprehensive Land Act in a manner that respects and understands their wishes. You can't wish them away. Secondly, we have to make sure that that Land Act takes care of agricultural production. In other words, it must say, amongst others, that so much land is available for agricultural purposes. Those who want to farm, come and farm. Here are allocations for farming, maybe on the 99-year lease approach. Because not all of us want to farm. Difficult, dirty, dangerous. That's what they call it. Not all of us want to farm, but there are some who do want to farm. And they must be given that opportunity to farm. So land is allocated clearly in the Land Act for agricultural purposes. But really there has to be a limit as to how many hectares one can have, really, truly speaking. Yes. I mean, sometimes, you drive from here to Zanin, you pass through tracts and tracts of land owned by one person. Can't be right. So there has to be some limit. And then land allocated for urban development, for housing, for all these other things. We still need land for factories and so on. But there has to be a clear system of ownership and title deeds that must be given to the people. Third immediate issue that I think should happen, really, really, truly, is that, and we don't have to wait for a long time for this, we can see that there is a desperate hunger for residential land. It's in our face every day. So if I were President Ramaphosa, thank God I'm not, but if I were, I would immediately start allocating land for residential purposes now. You don't have to wait for the conclusion of this debate. It's very simple. You develop the land, you allocate the stands with numbers. Immediately. That will stop this thing of land invasions. Immediately. These people in Amaskra will stop doing what they're doing there. Because we'll say, no, here is the allocated land. And in that process of allocation of this land, I once again like to emphasize that we have to remember that South Africa is a semi-arid country. Not all parts of South Africa are suitable, for example, for growing maize or bananas or mangoes and lychees. There are other parts of the country which are dry. So therefore, the manner in which we allocate land must take into account the protection of agricultural and grazing land. We have to be able to say to our people, you can't build a house here, this is for agricultural purposes. But you can build land, you can build a house there, which is properly allocated, demarcated for housing. And also we must be, in quotes, modern. There must be land specifically allocated for conservation purposes. Not just the Kruger National Park, but all kinds of nature conservation areas. We must protect them. At the moment, most of them are being vandalized because people have no access to land. I conclude by saying once again, as we have this debate and discussion, we have to bear in mind the urgency of the matter, but we must not debate this at the exclusion of other things. You can't say we're just having land expropriation without compensation, we don't care about inflation. You should care about it in the same way as you care about land. Because if inflation goes high, you're busy talking land expropriation, you'll have no money in your pocket. So thank you very much for that opportunity.
Nice, short, sweet. Now, my head is full of so many other stories. Maybe coming from the far north, because I used to work in the farm. I think I was doing grade 9, grade 10. I had to go and work in the farm and get dirty. Very dirty. Hey, I don't want to picture those years. Terrible. But at least we had to survive at that time, because that's what we had before us. Thank you very much, Dr. Mboweni. Let me invite Professor Matula Mutsecha to also give us his share.
Dr. Mkachwa. Dr. Mboweni is my senior and leader who taught me that if previous speakers don't use all their time, you take their time and add to their time. So I have 17 minutes. I actually want to deal with what the president called the original sin, and hope that this will not offend anybody who may see it as blasphemy. The intent of the president was not to be blasphemous. The situation is that the white settlers who arrived at the Cape violently dispossessed the Xhosas and the Khoisan of their land and its natural resources. And that led to a conflict between two white races, the English and the Dutch, fighting over the land and the natural resources of the African people. And that fight led to what came to be known as the Voortrek. And the Dutch, who were opposed to English domination and slavery, decided to move to the northern provinces, which were occupied by African people. When they crossed the Lekwe River, they found that African people called the area between Lekwe and Limpopo Lekwebebe. They called it the Transvaal, means we have crossed the Vaal River, which they renamed Vaal. And they met in Potchefstroom, which the black people called Dokwe, and decided to establish a war machinery consisting of commandos. And these commandos meant the Boers or Afrikaners knew nothing about democracy. They knew about war. Then their leaders were commanders, and therefore they established the commander system, commandos. To do what? To go and fight African people who owned land and its natural resources between the Vembe or Limpopo River and the Vaal River. And they divided Lekwebebe, which they called them Transvaal, into 6 districts. And I want to focus on their main district was Pretoria, which was Tshwane. And today, it's Pretoria, named after them. You can see even how the language changes. And then, I want to focus on one district, or 2 districts. Spilongwe, which was a combination of Waterberg and Vembe district, which was called Venderland. And Waterberg was the area controlled by Chief Malewogo, and Vembe by Uthobela Makhado, king of the Ravenners. And then there was what they call Oudbosdorp and Lowveld, which was called the land of tributes. In Sotho, Gulobedu, which was under Queen Mojaji. And the chiefs that my brother and comrade is mentioning, Letswalo, Mamatola, Mage, Mamaila and all others were senior traditional leaders under Queen Masalanabo Mujaji. Now, then comes the church. The Berlin mission establishes a mission in Skukuneland, and they introduce a new culture and religion. Skukune expels them, they run to Middelburg and establish a mission station there. But they go to a place called Mpume, where the University of Limpopo is, where you have Balobedu of Mamawulo under Queen Mujaji. They establish Krasenstein mission station. And then 1870, the missionaries understood that Queen Mujaji, a woman, owns the land. They asked for permission to establish a mission station at Hakapan, which they call Medinen, because a white woman in Germany sponsored it. Now you have two mission stations at near Terflo, another one inside Mujaji. And now comes the commandos. The commandos were based in Bulugwan. They take a decision that now they are going to take land and its natural resources by force. Now, the first fight, they found a woman called Masalanabo Mujaji II, around 1854, when the Transvaal Republic was formed. And Masalanabo Mujaji II and all the Mujaji dynasties, they saw themselves as the incarnation of the Queen of Heaven, because they said that in heaven the highest being is a woman, and on earth the queen is the earthly representative of the woman in heaven. And what you call the heavenly Father is the son of the heavenly Mother, which means the Balobedu and the Catholics would have agreed. Unfortunately, the Catholics did not come to that end. And then Queen Mujaji said she is going to defend the land on behalf of the heavenly Mother to protect the people on earth. Where was the terrain of this struggle? It was on the Drakensberg, where the Mamatola and that were referred to in the Litswalo lived. And that area was called the Garden of Queen Mujaji, of the Garden of Mujaji the Rain Queen. And that mountain was named Vyatladi, Vyamamrela, because it is the area where it is believed the powers in heaven are located to hold together proper rainfall and water springs. Therefore, it was important for Queen Mujaji, as the rainmaker, to defend that place, because without the security of Yatladi, there would be no rain, there would be no security of the soil. Unfortunately, that became the battlefield. And Mujaji said, Makoba, you are going to play the role of the Heavenly Father sent by me as the Heavenly Mother. And she said, Makoba, I am appointing you the Commander-in-Chief of the armed forces. All the chiefs are going to fight under you. And they formed a military alliance led by Makoba. And today they call it Makoba War. It was not Makoba War, it was Mujaji War. It was a holy war by the Rain Queen. And now, unfortunately, the people that my brother calls the Zulus from Natal were not only Zulus. They were Tsonga people, Batukuruaka Gwambena Zava, from Zimbabwe, who are Tsonga speaking, but who are related to Balobedu, although they speak Tsonga, because they didn't see themselves much in terms of Tsonga Lobedu. They saw themselves as the children of the sun. So the Tsonga people who fled to the Transvaal, and like other Sotho people, fought on the side of the Afrikaner, and others fought on the side of Mujaji. But some Tsonga people in Mozambique said, our people, meaning the Balobedu and the Tsonga and the Shangani who fled from the wars in Mozambique, are under attack. They sent arms to Mujaji, and Mujaji said, all the chiefs must bring their children, their women, and their cattle on the eastern side, and all men must go to war. And then she trained warriors to the front line to defend Yatladi, which is called the Drakensberg. And when that war was going on, the Voortrekkers attacked Malebo, Bahananwa ba Malebo. The Bahananwa came from Botswana. When they arrived, they sent a message to Mujaji to say, we have come to your land, because they saw Mujaji as the owner of the land, because she represents God on earth. And now Mujaji said, we are one people, we come from the land of the sun, Ukhalaka. You are welcome, but I'm going to give you a woman who will be the mother of all your chiefs, who will teach you ethics. And therefore Mujaji gave a woman, a Muluvedi woman, to the Malebohos. So the Maleboho chiefs were born from a woman from Bulobedu. Now, when the Boers attack Malewo, then Mujaji says, it means my children are under attack. Then she sends the arms from the Tsonga relatives in Mozambique to Malewo and people to go and defend Bahanano Bamalewo. And Makato says, I'm going to finish. Makato says, Mujaji is the queen who gives us water to wash our faces. Therefore, we are going to help the war against Malewo. So, what happens is that the wars of resistance were actually holy wars, also meant to defend the ecosystem. But African people were betrayed during the Anglo-Boer War, first one, the 1880 to 81, the second Anglo-Boer War, 1902, 1890 to 1902, but they fought on both sides, defending the white race, but after the war, they were betrayed. And that's why 1912, the African National Congress was formed to say, let's fight back. But on the basis that we want to create a non-racial society, that which means African people did not fight against the white race that betrayed them. But 1930, the white race consolidate their power. They give African people 7%. 1913, they gave African people 13%, which means they own 87%. Now, values, which is more important. If you stop me before I talk about values, it means you are sabotaging this conference. 1921, Reverend Mahabane said, African people are landless, voteless, houseless, and so on. And he says, only the recovery of the African humanity is the basis for the recovery of the humanity of all people, South Africans, both black and white. So the issue of Ubuntu, Butu, Wunu in Tsonga became a central value system. 1923, the ANC adopts the first Bill of Rights, which says restore the African humanity, allow African people to participate in the economic life of the country. You cannot participate in the economic life without land. 1930, Charlotte McGregor says women's rights are also women's rights, human rights. 1935, the church blesses the war against Ethiopia. And 1939 to 1939, black people help Europeans to fight against fascism and Nazism. The Europeans would not have won the war without blacks. But 1942, the white people of Europe betray Africans and give the East Germans the right of self-determination by virtue of Kaya and not Africans. And that's when Mandela and Tambo and others founded the Youth League. The birth of radical African nationalism, at the same time with the Afrikaner nationalism. Two nationalisms at war. UN formed in 1949. The White West collaborate with Jan Smuts. They don't restore the right of African people. 1948 Universal Declaration of Human Rights adopted. The world sits and watch when the Nationalist Party comes to power on the platform of racism.
My reading of the situation is that we don't have time on this. We really don't. And the longer we delay, the more space we're opening for populists and anarchists to occupy the space. And honestly, Chief, you're in Parliament there, maybe you see the President more than I do. The agency of allocating land for residential purposes. Really, if there's anything that we can say to the government loud and clear. You know, I go home regularly more than he does. He's my neighbor, but he hardly comes home. What do you? So I drive home regularly. You see, once you pass the Zambezi off-ramp and then the petrol port on the N1, on your right, before Moscow, on your right, used to be open land, I think managed by the Tshwane municipality or something like that. About 4 months ago, it was still open land. Today, is haphazardly occupied. When I say haphazard, means there's no street, there's no sewage system, there's no electricity system, there's no playground for the kids, there's no hospital, there's no clinic. It's a memermus. Just crude as that. So when I say allocate, I mean allocate land and develop it, streets, you know, stands, playground for kids, church grounds, and so on. We must look more organized than 21st century, honestly. We can't look like we are really, no.
And said the baobab trees are dying. Because the baobab tree is the tree of life, which is referred to in the African anthem. And its original name is Mubuyu Wamakazi, which means the tree of the mother of life. So if the baobab tree dies, it means the earth is dying. And then when you sing the second anthem, Nkosi Sikelel, it fits very well with the African anthem. Defend Mother Earth. Now, you know, you raised a very important question to say, what is the role of the international community in this matter? Because Cecil John Rhodes, who had his headquarters in Cape Town, at Groote Schuur, was the son of a missionary who had failed an economics degree at the University of Oxford. But he did not worship Jesus Christ. He worshipped the Queen of Heaven. If you go to Groteskil today, there is a bird at Groteskil called the Bird of Heaven, Shiriadenga. That's where Cecil John Rhodes worshipped before he took any decision. And he's the man who developed the British imperialist plan to say the British race must colonize the whole of Africa.
I'm able to hear nearly everything, but not everything. And I was simply not able to hear some of the questions from the floor. And I apologize that I can't respond to that. But I was very struck by the immense richness of what I've been hearing from my two fellow panelists here and from the floor, showing precisely the kind of wealth of understanding and knowledge about our very painful past that we need to know. We need the truth of it. And I'd like to thank them very much for that. It is a very painful past, and all I want to do is to point to something in our past right near the very beginning of the contact between Europe and Southern Africa that is not painful and that I find personally inspiring. The very first contacts from the Portuguese were with the Hoi Hoi people of what is now the Cape province. And they were not good ones. For example, when Da Gama set foot near what is now Mossel Bay, they simply went to a spring there and took water. There's no record that they approached the pastoralist Hoi Hoi people there for permission to do that. There was even a fatality as one of the African people was shot. A terrible start there. But those were short contacts, tragic and awful though they were. What I want to tell you about is something that's not widely known, and that is the first sustained contact between Europeans and Africans took place somewhere in the area near where Kosi Bay is in KwaZulu-Natal now, on the coast, very near the border with Mozambique. According to the historian who specialized in the study of the Portuguese in Southeast Africa in the late 1400s, the following event happened there. Now, I've had personal contact with this historian, and so I'm repeating what I got from his published work and from him personally. And that is the Portuguese ship coming back. The Portuguese were not interested in settling or colonizing. Their imperial interests were in India and in what is now Malaysia. On their way back, to head back to Portugal, the ship in which they were sailing, I understand something went wrong and the ship had to be beached at a high tide and repairs made. And then only at the next high tide, which would be a month later, would they be able to float her off again. So in that time, they were completely dependent upon the people of that area. What happened is an inspiring story of kindness, of helpfulness, of generosity, of helping with food and water. And when finally the ship was repaired and was able to float off again and return to Portugal, the captain in his log, where he had to keep a record of what happened, made an entry describing this time, the first extended contact of people of Europe with African people, describing what happened. That log was in an archive in Lisbon where the professor concerned that I'm referring to found it. And the most important part of it wasn't just this great and moving story. It was that that captain gave our part of the world, Southern Africa anyway, perhaps just South Africa today, today's post-colonial division, its first name in a European language. He called it, in Portuguese, Terra de Boa Gentes, and that means the land of the good people. I think that's a wonderful story. The Terra da Boa, Terra is the land, da Boa, Gentes, of the good people. So generosity and kindness produced this appreciated name for this land as the land of the good people.
I'm going to call upon the rapporteurs to come and report from your discussions, and then we'll engage from there. I will also limit the discussions to particular times, particularly because one of the things that I picked up when I walked around was that some of the commissions were cutting across. They were also dealing with the issues which were in the other commissions. I went to 2 commissions that were discussing issues that belong to the other commissions. And then there the leader, the coordinator is saying, no, I'm handling it, chief. I'm referring and handling. So we will have to manage time. I think we have about 45 minutes to finish the discussions.
Our commission focused on legislative and legal ramifications of land expropriation without compensation. The opening or the floor was laid on by the resource person, our resource person, Professor Mutsecha, who had outlined the state of land expropriation without compensation to a point where we are. Firstly, is the governing party resolution in December 2017 at NASREC for land expropriation without compensation. Then in Parliament again, we had the EFF introduce the motion of land expropriation without compensation, which was supported by the ruling party. However, the ruling party's emphasis was do it constitutionally. Then the Constitutional Review Committee is conducting a consultation with communities, with individuals and with stakeholders to ensure that whatever is happening or whatever decision we come to about land expropriation without compensation is within the legal prescripts of the country. However, the question that set the floor opening in our commission is whether the way the Constitution is written binds the hands of government. Does the change of Section 25 to allow government, the change of Section 25 allow government to reverse the triple challenge of poverty, inequality and unemployment through land distribution? Again, the issue of the skills of young people and the production of from the land, is that in line with the prescripts? But then the inputs made by my fellow commissioners in the group indicate that firstly, it is agreed the Constitution must change. However, the distinction is that there must be a distinction between land and property. Where there's property, but then where there's property, it always goes with compensation. But then when it comes to land, then there's partially talked about compensation, but somewhere there is no compensation. So there needs to be a balance between the land versus property versus compensation, as well as the expropriation. The Constitution must change. It must change to a period before the Land Act of 1913 because land was taken prior to 1913. The Constitution should not change for a period of about 1913 onwards. We have to consider the historical perspective that was given prior in the morning during plenary. There needs to be an assessment of the land to be expropriated. The amount of the land to be expropriated must be linked to the history of the land and the amount that it was initially bought for before or after 2013. The other issue is, who are we expropriating the land for? Do we have the framework and laws to ensure sustainability of the land after expropriation? These are what the legal framework must focus into. Again, in expropriating land, we do not have, or the legislative framework does not have to repeat the injustices from the past. But however, the emphasis is that land must still be given back. Land expropriation, and emphasis in the commission is it must go with the skills development. Skills development goes with understanding the value of land economically as an asset. Hence, the closure of agricultural colleges was detrimental to the land question, to land expropriation, and to many of our people. In order to restore the dignity of people through the use of land, there needs to be a youth participation in the commercial wing of land. And there's a need to bring in institutions of higher learning into addressing land question through curriculum, through the issue of reviving agricultural colleges and agriculture as a taught course at universities. The other input from the Commission is that when communities claim their land back, legislation must allow for communities to assign the people within their own with skills to work the land. If there's no such persons, there must be some setting aside of the expropriation of that land until the community has the skills to develop their own land or to work their own land. For instance, if we have Bakatla or Bakwena or Bakurutsi who have a portion of land or a sector of land that they need to claim, that land must be allocated together with the skills that will be ensuring prosperity of that land. The question that also came up is that why are we looking into the legal framework when we talk about land expropriation? When the land, the history of forceful removals and land expropriation, it was taken without such legal considerations from the people that we are talking to. The resource person already responded to that in his response, but I think he'll address it again. As Africans, we have been a farming people, and whilst we're always managers of African people, hence the skills have always been there. Again, then it indicates that there is no need to go deep into the legal framework for expropriation to get implemented. The skills are there, the history of African people and farming has always been there. From a legal perspective, the input is that why are we speaking only to Section 25 in general without looking into the subsections such as willing buyer, willing seller, and how far those have benefited the process or not benefited the process of the land question. Another input is that the law must be changed as land was taken using selective laws to suit a particular race or group. The same process that is being reversed today, we are just being diplomatic and doing it constitutionally. In history, the historical perspective also indicates that the creation of the Union of South Africa in 1910 was one of another justifications of land expropriation from the rightful owners. However, that reversal process must take a legislative process, and constitutionally it must be put in such a way that it benefits all of us. Those defending Section 24, an important point is that they have self-interest and are leading the country into anarchy as they use the same clause, same Section 24 against land expropriation, but only to the selective benefit of the few. Another issue is that when in 1994 we all voted, the indication was that land will be available legally. Today, now the question is, why do we have to go back to court to take the land when we are also talking about the issue, or when 1994 also talked about the issue of the willing buyer, willing seller. The youth must be encouraged to acquire the skills to work and man the land, especially abundant land in the country. The consultative approach to change the law, it will ensure that the land case and the changing of Section 25 is winnable. Hence, the Commission is taking the national consultation process. The issue of the zoning of land, it must be legislated properly. The zoning of land must be done appropriately through laws, and again, the economical classification of land, it must also be legislated appropriately to benefit as many people as possible and essentially towards the sustainability of the land that is expropriated. The church also made an input and also submitted a resolution that was being made, and I quote that there is a need to alter the neoliberal market approach in shaping socio-economic development, especially when we talk about the land. The church indicates that in Section 25, what legal aspects need to be amended there. There is also a need for public awareness and to educate people on the section that is going to be amended to ensure that as a people we fight for things that will build the nation. There is a need at governance level to implement Section 24, but through a public awareness program to ensure that everybody is on board and is in line with what is being amended. The legislation needs to relook at the sharing of farms with the farm owners, as that aspect has the potential to divide us as a nation. The issue that a farmer would allocate about 50% and make about 70% of people share it, while he shares, he only owns the other 50%. The few that are sharing the 50% at the end will be competing against each other. They also will be fighting for the very same space that should have been made productive to their benefit. So the legislation parallel and the dynamics of how to reach that expropriation is completely different. Hence, the traditional leader approach or a conciliatory approach with the traditional leaders needs to be considered fully. There is also a need to establish another committee in addition to the committee that's going for national consultation to review the expropriation process to ensure that equitable share is implemented. And again, the question of Section 25 that is raised is which land in Section 25 is going to be addressed in line with the different lands, as we have abundant land, we have agricultural land, we have also commercial land. What percentage and which sections will be amended? Okay. Then also in addition to the amendments of Section 25 is the reverse of the dynamics of ownership and working the land. But then again, in conclusion, the remarks is that we have to understand the value of land and identity. We need to understand the land and industrialization, the utilization of space, as well as problems with congestion, problems of congestions in Gauteng and in all the centralized areas. How about approaching land from a decentralization perspective? Then in the closing remarks, the resource person indicated that the cycle of land expropriation, should also make skills development should not make skills a prerequisite for land expropriation. Farm owners have always had African people working and using their skills as farm workers, whereas they are also temporary settlers in that land. However, to minimize anarchy, we need to do things lawfully but speedily through the legislative frameworks. Thank you.
The Commission decided that our feedback would be structured as follows. That we'll have the part that where we have noted and believing and therefore recommend as follows, that being the resolutions that we're proposing on the issues that affect the environment. We first started off discussing how the environment affects all of our communities, and we noted that practicality of what land is used for is very important. Importance of forests, trees, and that we must also be mindful that there are people who are affected and parties that are also involved, that there is ancestral land, church sites, and that there is more to land than agriculture, title deeds, etc., as well as the need for social amenities, communal land that is there, emissions that we find not to be appropriate that are all over. An example was that we looked at the issue of Jockskey in Alexander being a typical example of that. But this is as a result of lack of mostly bylaws that are supposed to be governing our environments. And by and large, the issue of neglect. In as far as unrehabilitated areas, such as those that previously were allocated to mining houses that are there. But then we believe that land is our inheritance, and that there's an impact on ecology, natural resources, as well as religious usage, etc. That land is a heritage that is being used as a proxy of service delivery or lack thereof, and that maintain values that are in the environment, and that ownership impacts on the environment and the environment on ownership. That mining has brought about much squalor and neglect. If you go Merafong in the nearby areas as well as around the Meadowlands and all of those areas where we have mining dumps that are there that are causing quite a lot of illnesses as a result of the environment. Water rights, also as they affect dams and rivers, as well as the issue of irrigation. That heritage encapsulates gender clauses that discriminate against women, and that we should be mindful of that. That these issues, or that in the process, the issue of gender or women parity must be addressed. Expropriating land, rural impoverished communities, rural land and subsistence, that laws must help us to accommodate such issues. The impact of environment, particularly as it affects subsistence farming, because people live off the land. In addressing the issue of diversity of needs, the history of every piece of land, the recognition of indigenous people must also, that those areas must not be touched. Where you find that since time immemorial, people have always lived in those communities. We should, in addressing or in rolling out expropriation without compensation, make sure that those communities are, in as far as possible, not touched. That partnership is critical for our empowerment, particularly as there's a need for issues of training, so that people know how to take care of the land. Agriculture productivity is also one of those areas that must be looked at. The impact of mining on farming and environment where people are staying. Issues of water contamination, that relevant stakeholders must come together. The integration of government departments, demarcation of areas, and for an example, areas such as needed for initiation schools in urban areas such as your Gauteng and some of the areas that need the service. COPTA, rural development, agriculture and rural development must also be brought on board. So it's important that these departments are working together so that they are able to address the hunger need that is there within our communities. So we've said that environmental impact is very high. And therefore we've resolved to recommend that nothing must be done haphazard. That there must be the consciousness to protect the ecosystem, including the wildlife. And people gave an example such as your Varmanstar, where people were given land, but there were animals, and the first thing that they did was to hunt or kill the animals that were there in that area. That expropriation must take into account the legal framework, the relationship with the Amakosi, Mahosi, and the issue of title. That lineage must avoid jeopardizing our women, and that grazing land must also be protected. We've said that there are 55 million people, so expropriation with or without compensation, without planning, will be disastrous. That there must be respect for conservation. I think it ties into that issue which we have referred to, wildlife, because conservation does not only relate to wildlife, we also still find that there are certain plant or species that needs to be protected. And therefore we should be very clear that those are the areas that must be tied, so that accountability must be attached to the entire process. So that it's not that everybody who's going to decide, this is what we are doing in this municipality, prioritizing certain issues at the expense of those that need to be protected. We must be clear that what we mean by expropriation is expropriation for what, for whom and why. And the ideological outlook thereof must be correct such that there is just avoid political experience in dealing with this whole issue. Because food security is very critical. And then we've looked at some of the areas such as ZZ3, ZZ2, yes. Food security, I wanted to just find out whether you're still paying attention. Yes, but this is clear, Chairperson, that there's a high level of concentration. So ZZ2, including international obligation on food productivity. But what is very critical is that we should make sure that there is enough food locally here, and that's a priority. Consideration of communal projects for cooperatives in urban forests, as such as those that were hinted by traditional healers, where they have mentioned the need for them to receive support in this area. The students were also in our midst, and they also highlighted that in the process, issue of in addressing human settlements and all of those patterns, we shouldn't forget the critical area of student accommodation, because there is an over-reliance on unaccredited places which are taking place. So we've said that land compensation without land expropriation without compensation offers opportunity to empower our youth and other women and other interest groups economically. Because there is land that is lying fallow that must be optimally used. Traditional systems must also be taken into account, which we know that in some areas there's an erosion of the forest, must also be taken into account to protect the environment for future generations. Damming must be prohibited, and that habitats and environment-friendly approaches must be adopted. You know that in some areas you find that a farmer just decides, here, this is passing through my area, so I'm damming here, forgetting the people that are maybe low-lying areas down there who will then not have water. So the issue of water rights is something that also needs to be revisited. It needs to be looked into so that you can expropriate without compensation but still leave the issues of water rights unresolved. We've said that job creation opportunities are there in rehabilitation, unlocking the potential for development and fighting poverty, or the triple challenges as we call them. But what is important also is that in the process we must ensure that we protect our trees, because we know that trees are related to life and breath and all of those things that you all know. We've said that there are 60 billion that was set to be paid as deposit towards rehabilitation by mining houses. But that 60 billion remains unused because of the process where mining houses ultimately pull out of our communities and we still have those areas. So we're saying that this is an opportunity that needs to be utilized to boost employment. So there must be that unlocking of that potential. Government must embark on awareness programs on environment as well as land usage. Because our people really don't know how to use land. What is it that you don't do? What is it that you do? That we wish also to reiterate that expropriation without planning is a disaster. Environmental policies, people must be made aware of. But key and above all is the issue of capital injection. Implementation of policies, values, and ethics. We must inculcate respect for the land and the environment. And we went back and looked and said, what are the values that we're looking at? The values that must be fair and just, no abuse, uphold honesty, integrity, efficient management for better outcomes. Ngiyabonga, kiyaleboga.
Any clarity-seeking questions? One.
My name is Paul Ntsabele. I'm the trustee of the Dr. Samuel Tsunyane Rural Development Foundation. It's actually very interesting that they mentioned the rehabilitation fund and that the 60 billion rand, which is untouched. We actually are releasing a follow-up article on the issue of mining. I think mining has largely gotten away with the crime in South Africa without taking ownership of it. In fact, it's very interesting. We don't actually need to expropriate land in South Africa. We did research with the University of Pretoria. There is over 5,836 ownerless and derelict mines which the DMR owns. And they own millions and millions of hectares which is under the DMR. Because what happened was before 1994, you didn't have the obligation to rehabilitate the mines. So a lot of the mining companies just literally left after mining and left the responsibility with government. In some of those mining areas, they exist or coexist with some of the most fertile soils and with the highest rainfall in the semi-arid countries. So for example, in Mpumalanga, you find areas where Exxaro owns 10,000 hectares of land, but the mining activity only happens on a 200-hectare radius. So the rest of the 800 hectares, you've got infrastructure, you've got rainfall, you still have good soils, and nothing is happening. So one of the suggestions is, why doesn't government then take those 5,836 mines and millions of hectares and use the 60 billion rand rehabilitation fund to buy inputs. So you lower your cost. You don't have any cost on capital that's tied to land. You've got free land which you can give to people, and then you use some of those funds to buy inputs. And in that way, we could actually avoid this whole expropriation without compensation. Thank you.
As Moshawa Mona South Africa is that today I still bury my grandmother or my parents and still need to pay. I get we travel section in area hore re go space sa go boloka ba ba go le ba banyane ba le fasilena na ka mo.
Thank you. I think on the issue of economic empowerment, I still stand with the concept there for better rehabilitation and promotion of job opportunities. Places like the Freire Fort Dome should be well captured and also improve the quality of life of our people. Thank you.
Someone on food. Born and tell from the bar. Okay. Ubabu Paula, he presented his as a resource person. So he emphasized a lot on the issue of we need also to check the issue of the banks, because the banks also own, commercial banks also own 125 million billion of the land in the country. So the question of land distribution is not just about rights. It is fundamentally about wealth creation and socio-economic development. So the Commission also made some point, because we also acknowledge and aware that this discussion it's not likable to the market. We know that they disapprove what we are doing, or because we are discussing the issue of the land. So they don't approve that. Also the point that the Commission also indicates, it's we can't say we have a freedom, but we are not economically free. We also need to balance the two. When we say political freedom in economy, also you need to have that. Another issue is when we discuss these issues, it's also important that we don't fight amongst ourselves. We make sure that we focus, like what Father was indicating in the morning meeting. We let us be sober and make sure that whatever we do, even though it's a very, very history, very bad and painful, when these things are unfolding, as far as in 1510 and so on. So another issue is when we discuss this thing, the issue of land, we also need to be within the framework of the law, and we need to use the law in order to make sure that this issue becomes reality based on the law, not on the issue of the anger or the common sense and so on, because it's going to collapse the whole thing and will be like other countries that won't mention it on this platform. And it's also important that the state should also, in fact the state knows that this land is for agricultural purpose, this one is for residential, this one is for industrial and so on. So when we discuss, the state should also assist, as we have this much of land for residential purpose, this much land for agriculture, and this much land for industrial. So because we must have land that will accommodate such sectors in our economy and so on. So another thing, because we see the importance of scientists being involved, because some other lands are dolomite, other lands are not this and this and so on. So we need a clear report, a clear indication from the scientists to assist. This kind of land should not, because particularly in the West Rand, there were some houses that were built on top of dolomite and so on. Some of the houses are falling and so on and so on. So we need an informed decision when we discuss this. There are a lot of issues. This issue of land, it opened a lot of things that we need also to consider when we discuss the issue of land. And the other issue is that it's also important with how do we, when we, and like what the question of our leaders say, were saying, when we say we take the land, who should receive the land? And that person will be having the land. We should not the land that will receive the land and do nothing, like what we've been doing since 1914 this far. We have the land and we don't do anything. We just sit with the big hectares of the land and don't do anything. So that kind of culture, of that tendency, we should not consider when we deal with this land in the process. And also it's important that working capital is needed to accommodate the decision that we take regarding this issue. I will just be fast because some of the issues are also appearing on other commissions. It looks like, particularly here in Gauteng here, we need residential land other than your agriculture or your industry and so on. But the residential one is more and more needed, unlike other. It doesn't mean that we don't want to be agricultural conscious or do business in agriculture and other things. So, but residential also need to be considered here in Gauteng, according to the participants in the commission. So the positive side of when we see as the commission is all about the economic impact, we see the positive side of if this process unfolds and continue to give land to respective people or any institution to make sure that it does something. It should create an employment for young people or the citizens of this country, and also some trainings for the same young people, for those who are interested in farming and do other things. Because without that kind of environment, it will give meaningless to us as the young people. The most important one, it's important to survey this country, to survey the whole country in order to make sure that when you talk about, because there are so many people who don't have your title deeds. There are some many EGs, your Limpopo, your this and that. And even our own location where we come from is Bukene. We've been staying there with our parents for many years. Today we are more than 40 years, but we don't have title deed. So title deed, economically it talks money, it talks this and so on and so on. So we need to consider such things as the... I've been going to Congress, so I don't know. I'm going to cut you. Okay, let me indicate it, the last one.
The resolutions, they are there.
The resolution, wherever I've been saying, is part of the resolution. Oh. Yeah, also the commission proposed that foreigners who came to invest in our country should be afforded a renewable lease of 20 years or more. Not when you want to invest, you come and give you land. We need to give you, we give you this time and do something and develop our own our area and so on, but not give you. We should be very careful when you do things, when you unfold this process going forward.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you. I'm not going to take questions now. I'm going to allow him to give us the resolutions. Particularly because the issue that they were dealing with, the ethical part of it, Professor Prozeski dealt with it. And I hope we were all here. He dealt with the issues of the ethics of the soil and all that. So we don't want that history because we know it now. It's just like if you were to go back to what Matulom Sefa was saying, that history we know it. So now we want the resolutions from your group, Chief. The chairperson has spoken.
Thank you, Chairperson. Firstly, I would like to thank our Professor Martin Prozeski for your humility, for your the way you shared your story, it was really encouraging, and then it gave us a way forward somewhere. I wished you shared that story here so everyone can hear. But having said that, we were looking at the issue of values, because values is something that is not seen. You can't see it. You know, you see it by action when someone is doing something. But what stood out in our commission, it was the matter of exchanging of land must be done in the spirit of Ubuntu. And then that's unfortunate, because when the land was taken, there was no spirit of Ubuntu. And because now we have to practice it. And I would like to say to the governing party, they are practicing this ethnic. Because once you have stolen something from me, I have to come back and grab it by force. But now, because we are in an environment whereby there's tolerance, we have to applaud that. Because in other countries, Baba, you don't negotiate, you take what was taken. But having said that, we said the moral obligation is very important when we do this process. We have to look at how we're going to restore the human dignity. Let me just say, for an example, I'm a young man who's working, earning 10,000. You can't be approved by the bank. You can't be approved by the social development or how a settlement. We are in between. And that is why we are saying this land issue can restore a dignity for a young person who earns 10,000 but you can't afford a bond. And the other thing that we said land audit is very important. I won't dwell much on that because some of the groups spoke about it. And then we said transparency. What we mean by transparency? Our government must be transparent and be trusted. Because sometimes we know that greed has found itself in our government. Whereby when you see people selling land nowadays, let me not go there because time is not on my side. But what stood out, what the professor said, that is very interesting. He said, one word of truth can save the whole world. You know what? It's only the truth. What was stolen, those who stole must tell the truth. And then once they tell the truth, then we'll be humble, we'll come down and address the issue head on. Then that is why the truth is one of the ethnics that we need in our country. Ethnicity, yeah, that's English, it's poor. Ethics. And we are talking about the social impact. What are the social impacts that we have been seeing in our country? The land grabs. If you are living in that country and then you don't have that attitude of land grab, we'll ask you where you're from. Because we want people who have the land grab attitude. But we have to address that issue. Because someone spoke about the country, it said what, the ticking time bomb. I think we are there. The time is not on our side. We have to address this issue head on. We spoke about lawlessness and greed. And then we said the truth must be put into action. And then the truth must be kindly. Because once we do that, we'll achieve this in that spirit of Ubuntu that we're talking about. Because us, Africans, we like negotiating. Even when we're not supposed to negotiate, but we'll always negotiate. But having said that, I want to just say to you all, the social and the ethical issues in our country are at that stage whereby it needs inclusivity. I think the professor spoke about inclusivity, where everyone must come on board to address the issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. There are a lot of small pieces of papers here and thank you very much. I think now we have the gist of the discussions on what happened in the commissions. Now, I'm going to allow Professor, Mr. Dr. Matole Mutshekga to give us the parliamentary process. What is the review process that is underway? Just to say, how is it and how can we also contribute to the discussions? Just 2-3 minutes, not more than that. He said 2, I'm giving him 3.
South Africa needs ethical and moral leadership. And Dr. Mkachwa, Father Mkachwa, has provided that. And we must give him a big round of applause. And when I go back to Parliament, I'll recommend that they give him more money for the moral regeneration. I think the overriding consideration is that we need to build a new and socially cohesive nation. To borrow from the MRM, by harnessing the moral wealth of the nation for the recovery of the African humanity, Ubuntu, as a prerequisite for the recovery of the humanity of the people of South Africa as a whole, both black and white, so that we can build a model society that was envisaged by the founders. Lastly, I want to ask the MRM and yourself to make this recommendation, that we get a judicial truth and reconciliation commission, that all people that are in political office, from local government, provincial government, national government, and parliament, who have stolen, must appear before a judicial commission of inquiry. And just declare everything that they've stolen and forfeit that to a reparation fund. That fund must be used to eradicate the informal settlements. And those people must be blacklisted. They must no longer stand for any political office at all. Because the state capture, arrests are not going to help us. The prisons are full of young people. We don't want any more people there because there is no place for rehabilitation. Now, Father Mkachwa, I'm a member of the Constitutional Review Commission. We will request that you prepare, I see you have a very capable chairperson. Prepare a very good report within less than 2 months, so that when the commission completes its work, your report must be ready, because it's the only report that will talk to the ethical and moral questions which are lacking amongst us as public representatives. So your input will be the most important input in Parliament. So we will also make sure that you come and address all the parliamentarians, speak to the report that will come out of this process. So I can assure you that if we can go that route, we can save South Africa, and South Africa needs to be saved. And thank you very much. I'm on my way.
Thank you very much. I'm a very good listener, Father. You must remind Professor Matula Mutseha that I'm a very good listener, and I'm waiting. We'll wait for the invitation. We'll do the report, of course. We have got capable people who are working around here. They will be able to do that report. So we'll take it from there. And I'm hoping that it will materialize. But what I like the most is that he will speak on our behalf for Parliament, for the government to inject more resources. I'm hoping to see that. No, thanks very much. Let me invite, maybe one of the things that I need to indicate, Professor Mutseha, I've always been with the MRM since we started. Yeah, in the process they fell in the cracks, but I was happy to see him on the program that is coming to address us, because he has been with us. And I saw two other old men here. They may not agree that they are old, but they are old. Yeah, you are old. Two other old men here who have been with us, but they look alike. So all along I thought you are him and he is you. There's something that we need to deal with there. Reverend Wesley Mabuza, please come and render the vote of thanks on behalf of the Moral Generation Movement. I wish you can take a picture, Chief. I wish you can take a picture of him and him. And yeah, these two old men have always been there. I think we can give them a round of applause. That they are still with us, still supporting us. We really appreciate that.
Program Director, thank you so very much indeed. My work is very easy. Already it has already been said, it really not just thank Father Mkhatshwa alone, but also the staff of MRM for organizing this. And we would like to give them a round of applause, please. Thank you so much. We thank the panelists for the excellent work they did by leading us and guiding us, and their valuable contributions have really opened our minds. We also thank the facilitators of the groups who did it so very ably, and the rapporteurs. Thank you so very much indeed. And obviously the resource persons were also involved in this whole thing. And then we want to thank all the delegates for being here, for the contributions they made, which also educated us. And I just want to say, as South Africans, whatever happens, we must be very proud and thank God that we are able to come together and sit down, in spite of our tremendous differences. But at the end of the day, we come together and come out and cook something very, very nice. I remember that a guy in the advertisement who was to build a very happy house for his family. So Lynn, I wanted to say we are also able to build a very happy house. Then of course, lastly, I just wanted to say, Tate Lesiba has really requested us that we must, when we get the land, which has the animals, we must not expropriate the animals without compensation. Thank you so very much.
You see, they somehow look alike, yeah? Somehow. So, all along I thought he's here and he's here. So it's fine. No, thanks very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I must thank you very much. You've been a wonderful audience. Please follow us on our Facebook page. It's Moral Regeneration Movement. Like our Facebook page, make your inputs there. You can still talk to us. Even the programs that we are running, whether in the churches or in the community, let us know and see what type of contribution we can make. But the only contribution we have is here, it's not here. We don't have money, but we have brains. We can still shape your discussions to be those that will follow our objectives. We still believe that we can still build ethical and moral society. We are capable of doing that. And thank you very much for your time. Thank you for everything. Give me a round of applause as well. Thank you and God bless you.